Inspired by the life of the savvy and ambitious Colombian businesswoman Griselda Blanco comes a new Netflix original limited series. Griselda tells the story of a devoted mother who, with her lethal blend of charm and relentless savagery, creates one of the most powerful cartels in history. Witness Sofia Vergara's captivating transformation into the godmother of the underworld. Griselda, streaming January 25th, only on Netflix.
Listen to the 48 Hours podcast for shocking murder cases and compelling real-life dramas from one of television's most watched true crime shows. Go behind the scenes of each episode with award-winning CBS News correspondents and producers in Postmortem, a weekly deep dive. Listen to 48 Hours wherever you get your podcasts.
A note to listeners, the following podcast contains content that may not be suitable for all audiences.
I've never really spoken about what happened with me, my life, with how this all came about. Because, again, to understand, why would they put my life in jeopardy? I'm getting ready to go into prison for an amount of time that was pretty big. And as soon as anybody found out, I testified in a trial. It doesn't matter, it was a child molester and piece of crap. The fact is I testified on somebody, you see, so I would have been killed. They actually said that had I not been in jail during the time that some of those crimes had been committed, the stuff I was telling about, they said, if you weren't already in jail, I think you were involved because you know too much. That's why it was such an important thing that they kept it hidden. And that piece of shit of a lawyer, that piece of shit of a lawyer he had, that bastard should have, God, he was a snake. They had a bag of evidence in the back of the van hidden behind the wall panel where the tail light was. And the lawyer goes and gets the van out of the impound, and they destroyed the evidence. Bittaker told me it was there. Norris told me it was there. And the lawyer denied it. But when the police got to the van, the shit was gone.
You are listening to Partners in True Crime. We are your hosts, Rob and Cindy Dorfman. Hi, everyone. If you're enjoying the podcast, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, subscribe to our show, and go to our website, partnersintruecrime.com.
This week, we have an exclusive interview with Carlo Douglas. Although Carlo was a key witness in the trial of Norris and Bittaker, he chose not to participate in the documentary on the Toolbox Killers.
Carlo has kept a low profile, and this is the first time he's speaking publicly about his experience with the Toolbox Killers.
Carlo was 19 when he was arrested for murder. There's never a reason to take someone's life, but Carlo served his time in prison, and now he is a free man. Carlo was put into the county jail next to Bittaker, who befriended him. At the time, Bittaker was 38 years old, and Carlo was just turning 21.
It wasn't long before Bittaker began talking to Carlo on a daily basis, telling him stories of how he tortured and killed young girls. But the stories were so sadistic and crazy that Carlo didn't believe him.
When the district attorney, Stephen Kay, learned of Carlo's friendship with Bittaker, he brought Carlo in for questioning and asked him to testify at Bittaker's trial.
Even though Carlo was not going to get a reduced sentence for testifying, and he was essentially putting his life in jeopardy by testifying, he agreed to do it anyway.
Carlo's testimony was so accurate and chilling that it helped send Bittaker to death row.
This is just part 1 of Carlo's exclusive interview. Part 2 will be on next week. Okay, so we're back with Laura, and we have a really special guest today. His name is Carlo Douglas, and Carlo spent time inside prison with Lawrence Bittaker and spent a lot of time speaking with him about his crimes. And we're really fortunate to have him on the podcast today because we're going to hear and get a look at something that a lot of people haven't heard from, ever. It wasn't on the Toolbox Killer documentary. Carlo really hasn't spoken to anybody about what he's about to talk to us about today, and we're really fortunate to hear from him and hear his perspective, because he was one of the other inmates who testified while he was in prison against Lawrence Bittaker. Carlo, thank you for coming on today, and we appreciate you on there. And why don't you start off by, Carlo, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
A little quick clarification. I was never in prison with them. I was in the county jail with Bittaker, and I was locked up in High Power, which was a high security section in the LA County jail. And that's where I met him and He was being all braggadocious about all the things he did. And then later, after the conviction of Whitaker, while I was in a holding waiting to go to prison, that's when I met Roy. Now, I had seen him before, but I didn't know who he was per se. I'd never spoke to him, that type of thing. After the Whitaker trial, then Roy Norris and I were in a medical unit side by side with each other. So then that's where he told me a bunch of different things. It was more or less, he knew who I was at that point because of the testimony I had given. So he was kind of like forthwith with me in a lot more ways. Other than that, though, I'm retirement age. Unfortunately, not retired, though. I've had a pretty chaotic life, to say the least of it. It's been an up and down roller coaster ride. I came up through the 60s and 70s, and it was, without going into a lot of details of my own personal life, it has not been a charmed existence, not to any stretch. It's been rather violent, abusive, and really traumatic, and the fact that, I sit here and I can communicate and articulate intelligently with a person or someone, in conversation, you'd never have a clue as to what the hell has actually been, happened. But I wasn't in high power because I was such a good person at that time in life, not by any stretch. I've been reluctant partially to discuss a lot of what this is with other people. Mainly Laura was the first one I ever spoke with. Let me put it like that. And that led to these other people. And now you guys. But I've never really spoken about what happened with me, my life, how this all came about. Because, again, to understand, why would they put my life in jeopardy? I'm getting ready to go into prison for an amount of time that was pretty big. And as soon as anybody found out, I testified in a trial. It doesn't matter. It was a child molester and piece of crap. The fact is I testified on somebody, you see, so I would have been killed. And I was kind of young and stupid at the time, didn't realize how much of a jeopardy I'd put myself into. But my driving force was the things that happened to me when I was young, literally a child. I can vividly and clearly recall it all. And that's where my provocation personally and emotionally came into the testimony against Whitaker. So, it's not like where I saw this and I'm like, oh, hey, I know about that. Let me tell you. No, it wasn't that way. They found out that Whitaker and I had been talking because in high power, it's on recording. Everything's recorded. So they'd see him stopping at my cell all the time talking. And that kind of got their interest. So then when they talked with me and the detectives did, I really didn't, I'm laughing about it because I'm like, nah, he's saying this, he's saying that. And they're looking at me and they start scribbling, but I didn't believe him. Some of the things he told me and the descriptive things and the manner in which he did it. And so cavalierly, thinking about it now, I can realize he was really just cavalier about it. So I didn't believe it. It sounded like bullshit, braggadocious. It's like trying to make himself seem like he's more than he is. And that's 99% to go to jail. The guy ain't going to tell you he's in there for shoplifting. Oh, I'm in here for stealing $20,000 in purses. You get what I mean? It's
absolutely
always trying to pump it up to more than what it really is.
So when did you realize that he was telling the truth?
Well, when the detectives, when they came to me and they said, look, we'd like to talk to you. And I screwed with them at first because let me screw it. Because I was already convicted at that point. I was waiting for my bus ride to prison, you see. So it was like, so what, And when they started telling me, and then I told them, I said, look, the guy just talked a bunch of stupid shit. This is all bullshit. Come on. Really? He did this with a pair of pliers and and they're looking at me and they're stunned because I was explaining to them exactly what the autopsy reports were showing.
And Whitaker had told you all this.
Yeah. But I gave descriptive detail that, hell, even the coroner was the only one that really knew. And they had to go back to the reports and they started looking at some and like, holy shit, that's what that mark really is then. That's where things kind of came together.
Laura, why do you think Whitaker chose Carlo to talk to and tell all this information to?
I can say from my own personal experience, Carlo and I we've spent how many nights on the phone until 3, 4, 5 in the morning, talking about this case. He's very easy to talk to.
Mm-hmm.
And he's a great listener, so maybe Whitaker vibed with him the same way that I did. And what he's saying is all true. He knew about the ice pick through the nipple, and he was telling the cops, and the autopsy reports were right there. Yeah, Carlo told me, he was like, all these other victims he's talking about, I'm thinking it's bullshit. How does this guy kill this many people? And who would believe that? Even in a county jail, you're like, no way. There's no way.
So, Carlo, when you found out, you realized that this was true, it kind of triggered something for you from your childhood.
Well, yeah, well, see, I'd been molested as a child, you know. I mean, again, I had a rather crazy situation. There were times when I was put into mental facilities for being emotionally disturbed. Let me see how they put that. Emotionally disturbed and some other partial statement that was combination, how they pronounced it, you know. The truth was simple. I mean, they never even really knew the truth. I was happy to be in the mental institution because God knows it got me the hell out of the house where I lived. And the brutality and the beatings and the insanity and the abuse. I mean, it was just madness. And it just really sucked because I went from this situation to go to here. And then next thing you know, one of the aides there, you know, ends up molesting me in the middle of the freaking night. And unlike most, you know, even though I was only 7, not quite 8, I didn't give in, didn't give up, didn't bite my tongue. I next day started screaming and yelling at him about it and what he did and everything else right in front of everybody. They tried to tell me be quiet. I still remember that when he got up and threatening me, you know, in that manner of like towering over. And I looked at him and said, no, you did it. You know, and they were like so the solution was they took and they moved me to another place. That was, as far as I know, anything ever was done there.
Yeah. I want to go back a little bit because you said something that I wanted to talk to you about. You were giving the detectives pretty detailed descriptions of what Bittaker was giving you. And
right.
2 questions. Why do you think Bittaker was giving it to you? And second question is, did the law enforcement ever think you could have been involved in it with the level of detail that you gave them?
They actually said that had I not been in jail during the time that some of those crimes had been committed, the stuff I was telling them about, they said, if you weren't already in jail, I think you were involved because you know too much. You know. Now, as far as for why Bittaker, I mean, in analyzing it from now, looking back, you have to understand what high power was. Okay, 1700, 1750 in the LA County. I mean, you had different rows that were designated for different gang groups. Like, for instance, you had the AB row, you had the BGF row, you had the Emmy row. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
All right. And these were tier rows where only those category of people would be.
Can you explain to the audience, because they're not familiar with the acronyms on those, the A, B, and the B, just kind of
Aryan Brotherhood, Aryan Brotherhood, BGF, Black Guerrilla Family, the Emmy, Mexican Mafia. I mean, that's all pretty standard knowledge on the as far as for that goes. But yeah, but A and B row were for high-powered criminals or people that had high-power profile crimes that they had to be kept separate. Well, again, you have to look at the category and class of people that were there. Even though I was there for a murder, okay, and a rather vicious one, I was not the category and typical class of mentality of the people that were there. So you see, Bittaker couldn't just talk to people because you had people that would swipe at him through the bars. He wasn't safe. That's why you're on single lockdown and you're out by yourself. You're out on the tier only by yourself. Well, I was one of those few characters, individuals that looked like a normal person, and I was like, 20 years old at the time, not quite, I had turned 21 while I was in jail there. So you kind of get what I mean? I was very young, very naive. I didn't have that hardcore attitude that I displayed like other people did. Some of my neighbors on the tier there, aside from Bittaker, I had Kabegovich, the alphabet bomber.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow.
Oh, he was a character. He's the one that blew his cell door off one day with matches, using matches and toothpaste. He actually made an igniter and everything using a strike pad. And when they opened the door, it went one way. When it went back the other way, it struck, ignited, and blew the door off.
Wow.
Yeah, crazy. Again, it was an insane time. It was crazy. There were people like him. There was this other killer, the one that killed my nephew. I found out later. Ironically, William Bonin.
Mm-hmm.
He killed your nephew?
Yeah. Well, it turns out later on, we didn't find out till later.
Oh my God.
See, because nobody knew that my family had been, part of my family were Sharps. The last name was Sharp. And my nephew lived out here. And I hadn't spoken to my, half brother in any side of that part of the family for more than 20 years for about 15, close 20 years. So there was no contact, and I didn't realize. And then later on, when it came up, the remark was made. It's like, yeah, well, my name used to be Sharp too. And when they started doing research, it turned out that was my nephew. That's how I ended up being reconnected with that part of my family.
And
Wow.
he also testified against William Bonin at trial too.
Well, that's who I testified against first, was William Bonin. That's who I just went ballistic about. And then while I was in high power waiting to go to prison, I was in at security. And that's when the Whitaker episodes started taking place. And it's like, really?
I mean, makes sense.
Bond,
he was a predator and you were young,
Oh yeah, well, Bonin wouldn't want to predatorize me. I mean, he was that, he was a sick little perv, but he was a little guy. I mean, I would have beat the shit out of him. I don't know. I mean, for me personally, later when I realized that all the kids, and literally they were kids. All the people they attacked, they were kids. They were, young guys, underage, all of them. Oh, wait, no, I think there was one or two that were not underage. But in any event, you get what I mean?
Yeah.
So at that rate and point in time, I mean, I would have decimated his little ass if I had to. But, so it wasn't, again, another one that I didn't really take him seriously. I mean, when I was learning about all this stuff, I knew about this shit for a long time, and I'll give you an example. They actually came to me because there was one guy that they knew I had an association with. I wouldn't cooperate. I wouldn't. It was had to do with Zachariah, Israeli mafia.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Zachariah.
For people who don't know William Bonin, Laura, can you give a little bit of background on him?
So he was known as the freeway killer. He was active just before the time Whitaker and Norris were active. He's one of the most infamous serial killers in California. And he was same thing with a van, but he was picking up little boys.
Mm.
Well, he had a couple of friends that were also involved with him.
He did. I actually spoke to his crime partner until he was murdered in prison, Greg Miley, for about a few years. Yeah.
Yeah. But the other guy, I can't remember his name. We called him the Joker, the clown, and he killed himself, on the count. Ironically, after that shit ass killed himself, when they moved me from high power, that's where they put me, in the very same cell he was in.
Ugh.
He was pretty much the high power is where they put a lot of the infamous serial killers at the time, not knowing really what to do with them. This was a epidemic. Just all these serial killers coming up, and so Carlo was literally in the nucleus of these serial killers. They're all housed right next to him.
And you weren't
we were on the same row.
And
no, I wasn't. But I was accused of killing a rather prominent individual. I'm not going to go into details and stuff. I do know that his family is deceased now and gone. But there are certain factors involved with whose life I took and what went on and how it happened. And I can be honest, in hindsight, it was wrong in too many ways possible. And I don't want to put his name out there because his name is available if somebody wants to research and find it. It can be found, but I don't want to be disparaging to that individual.
No, and I don't want you to.
Okay.
I don't.
And
want
it's
you to.
inconsequential.
So you kind of get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like, that's why I'm refraining. But and the really sad part I was charged for a multitude of crimes. One of the charges was murder for hire at one point. They tried to say it was a hit job. They tried to say I used an automatic weapon, not semi-automatic, an automatic. And there are different factors that came up of things involved. And then also I had an alleged co-criminal, co-defendant at one time, but he was never arrested or charged. This was the individual they originally went after.
Carlo,
Right.
were you one of the ones that Whitaker tried to hire to kill Jan Mallon?
Well, he asked me about it,
Yeah.
but I'm like, dude, I'm getting ready to go to prison. I can't do shit, I'm locked up, and that's like that, Well, do you know anybody out there and blah, 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 that kind of thing was his thing,
And he was looking for someone to kill her because she could identify him.
Yeah.
Laura, can you tell us that story just a little bit? Just get people up to speed.
Yeah, so Jan Mallon was the 29-year-old flight attendant living in Manhattan Beach, and she had come home around 11 p.m. and she was parking her car. She had a detached garage, and as she was coming out of the garage, Whitaker hopped out of the van and sprayed her with chemicals and tried to drag her into the van. She's about 3 feet away from the van. Her screams woke up her neighbors, and thank God they came out and scared Whitaker and Norris away.
And so he was then looking while he was in prison for someone to do a hit on her.
Yeah, because she was the only witness who had come forward that could testify that these guys tried to abduct her into a van. So Whitaker was very scared, and that's why he kept trying to get someone to kill her from the county jail.
So, Carlo, how did he approach you with that subject matter? What was the conversation like? Was it just casual?
Yeah, well, it started off in a casual form. You have to understand, like, what high power was. You're locked down 23 hours a day, okay, by yourself. You never have contact with other prisoners. You're never out with other prisoners. Whenever you are out, you're cuffed up and escorted, security type thing. Okay. So you're not, but when you have what's called your hour of tier time, you get to walk up and down the tier and stuff. Now, a lot of people just pace up and down. Some of them won't even take their tier time, but the people you do communicate with or talk to, you have to, it's like you don't just talk to whoever. It's not that way. You don't really talk to anybody, But because I was one of them people, I mean, I didn't seem to be a threat. And per se, I wasn't. So Bittaker, I guess he felt comfortable. Like he'd seen Bonner and I talk a couple of times, and he's seen how I was with other people that I got like. So he started like, hey, how you doing? And I didn't know who he was at first. And then when they found out, I was like, I didn't really believe, in any of this. I mean, I was in that state of a denial that everything is wrong, the system's wrong, the criminal courts are wrong. They're trying to convict everybody innocently, even though I knew I was guilty as shit. I mean, but it was that mentality, the attitude, and at that time. This is not like today. We're talking 1978, 79, 80, you see. Much different time of how people acted in their mentalities and, things like that. But it started off in a really rather casual format. It was about talking about this or that, or it was kind of incidental that I was talking to the guy next door to me one time, this black guy next door. We were talking, because, we had bars in the front, solid wall. I was like, so you can hear each other and what have you. So we were talking about something I saw, and it had to do with mechanics, because I'd been pretty much a mechanic. I've always been very mechanically inclined, and I've done my own mechanics and stuff. So we were talking about something, and that's what really kind of opened the door, because Bittaker, when he first spoke to me, it was about the mechanic thing. He was not correcting me, but he corrected me on parts that he knew I didn't know. You kind of get what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like he realized that you knew this, but you don't know that. So he would tell me the parts I didn't know and show me. It was more or less his way of showing how much more brilliant he was.
The teacher. He was always the teacher.
You say, well, part of it was to me, I can say it was like part of it was an ego thing for him. Look how smart I am. Look at what I'm intelligent. Yeah, it was a teacher type of deliverance in a way, but there was a certain level of condensation in it or condescendingness to it, because of his whole approach. Was like, I know and you don't. You know what I'm saying? It was irritating in its own little way, but I never really paid attention to it. Huh?
Yeah, that's identical to my take with Bittaker too. Exactly how you're describing it.
And it's like where he wants to brag,
but
he doesn't really. I don't know. It's like I don't know how to explain that one. But it's like he wants to brag and he tries to, but he's not trying to be obvious about it.
He's coy, very coy. Yeah.
Yeah. And he'll say things in pieces. He'll leave parts out in the middle to make you have to ask the question.
Yep.
So it's like a trick maneuver. He would do this, and I noticed he did that pretty regularly. He would leave out little bits and pieces in the middle, and you're like, well, wait a minute, what about, and that's what he wanted you to do. He wanted to engage you and make you have to ask him questions so he could explain to you what you don't know.
Setting conversational traps.
Yeah, exactly. And it was more, but it was so to open that doorway for him to be able to say what he wanted to say about it. I mean, at the end of the day, he had a thing with keeping his mouth shut. He would pretty much tell anybody about some of the shit he's done, especially, like I can pretty sure say it for Laura. I know he was like literally bragging to you with all the shit he did and all his brilliance and everything, but at the end of the day, it didn't do him no good because he was rather stupid. Had they ever kept their mouth shut, they may have never been caught.
That's what got them caught. And that's what I actually wanted to get into, because when Bittaker gave me the police discovery, you were one of the first people I found and contacted.
I was probably the only dumbass that would talk to you. Okay? The rest of them were either in jail, dead, or dead.
The majority were dead from the jail
because they didn't change their lives. They didn't they didn't want to be different than what they were. They didn't change. I mean, I did. That's why I'm still alive and I'm still free now. Hey, Laura? That's why.
Yeah.
You say, I mean, how many of them were overdosed from drugs?
I think the majority. The majority were overdosed.
The majority of them did. Mm-hmm. I know Conejo's dead. I mean, and the ones that didn't overdose on drugs got killed because of drugs. Or something crazy. But yeah, it's like, wow, that just reminded me of one. Anthony Conejo.
We just had him on the show.
He's still alive?
He's still alive, yeah.
Anthony Conejo is still alive. How in God's name did that happen? Because they had so many people that wanted to kill him. Oh my God. No, I'm serious. He was such a snake.
Only three from the county are alive, and you're one of them.
Wow. I mean, I know I'm one of them. I'm obviously one of them.
Right.
Yeah. Anthony's still inside.
He's still
in prison. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's probably at Corcoran then, if I'm thinking correctly. He's in peace.
Chino.
Chino?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, he's that white elephant, what they call the white elephant at Chino. Yeah, I still remember all of that stuff from way back then.
Yeah.
In fact, that's where they sent me to first when I left from county. I went to Chino Central lockdown, and then they sent me over to the White Elephant for a little bit. And then I ended up getting rolled back up in St. Folsom. Fun times. As far as, like I say, back to the Bittaker thing and why he's, I think he was really aching to tell people about this. He had some weird thing with that he wouldn't keep his mouth shut.
Well, he was neglected so badly, in his childhood too. And in adulthood, that can show up as attention seeking. And especially with Bittaker, it did. He was dying for attention. And it.
Yeah, but Laura, my life story is, well, it's not well known. It's not completely a secret either. Okay. I was extremely abused as a child. I'm talking about times at 6 years old with fucking blood welts all over my body, including one across my forehead. I couldn't go to school for almost 3 weeks because my mother couldn't let them see those marks. You kind of get it? That's the shit I was living through on a regular basis. Okay.
It's horrific.
I mean, you talk about belts and broomsticks, and believe me, I know all about them. I used to get Hot Wheels tracks sets every Christmas. You know why? So my mom had a whole things to whip my ass with every year, okay? Because it would take me that long to get rid of all of them, throw them away, destroy them, what have you, before she, and then she'd buy me a new set for next Christmas. Yeah, like I had,
Yeah, so awful. I guess you're alluding to the fact that it doesn't make a difference what happened to you back then.
So it shouldn't. But you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I didn't become a child raper or murderer or anything like that. I mean, yes, I did do something horrible. I took someone's life. Let's get past that one. But it wasn't a child. It was an adult, a grown adult, older than I am at that time then. And so not that makes it any right or any better. But it wasn't, I've never been that person that, regardless of what I've been through. Because see, you have to understand, the shit I went through at home, I ended up going to institutions with, whether it be a mental institution or juvenile hall. I still, so now I'm in a situation where I'm battling even more bullshit and abuse. I'm having daily fights with people. You know what I mean? People that are trying to abuse you or sex you over. You know what I mean? That's what juvenile hall was even back then. It was like prison.
It's hard to have empathy for someone like Bittaker.
I didn't become that. I haven't become like any of them people did, you see? So again, I can understand there's a certain level of shit that happened to people when they were young or a child and all that, but guess the fuck what? They haven't been through any damn more than I have in my own right and way, okay? Most of my brothers and sisters won't talk to me because they're so ashamed now to have to realize and understand that, no, what happened with him and what he did and all the things, it wasn't really his fault. It was what happened to him. And they know I'm a survivor. They know I'm stronger than any of them because of the fact that I ended up. And then again, I didn't let it make me that way. I decided what I was going to be at the end of the day. I mean, I went through the drugs. I went through all of that insanity. In fact, that's what kept me alive all those years was the drugs.
But you make a really good point. I mean, regardless of what Bittaker went through, what he did was you can't even wrap your brain around it. It's
even when I was in that state of existence where I was drug addled and all the other crap, I still had a conscience. I did not like there would be people that bring hookers around, blah, 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 and they'd be abusive. And I would get pissed off. I would go off at people over being abusive to another person because they were weaker or lesser than them. You see what I mean? So I was like, I don't get it. You want to tell me about abuse? Abuse made me vicious toward victimizers. That's what the abuse has done to me. It's made me so damn determined that. So when I see somebody that's abusive toward somebody who cannot defend themselves, I get vicious on their ass. I'm not going to be the victor of victimized people. I'm going to get the victimizer. That's my mentality. It was the complete opposite of all of this. So I've never had that attitude, that mentality where I want to go and hurt people because I was hurt. No, if anything, I was fucking hurt. I got to help that person. They can't help themselves. Somebody needs. And I would take my joy of fucking up the idiot that's victimizing them. That's where I was like, yeah, you son of a bitch. How you like this? That was me. So again, where they come up with these scenarios of how they became with this and this is what made them like that. No, it's a choice you have to make.
Yeah. You're right.
Okay. Every damn thing I have done in this life, there are things that have guided me and provoked me in different directions. But at the end of the day, what I personally do is my own fucking choice.
Yeah.
And no one else's.
And with them, it was a premeditated choice.
Exactly.
Thank you. Very, very much so. Exactly. Exactly. Okay. Premeditated.
They thought about it a lot. They talked about it.
Years. They planned it for years.
He was always making different types of instruments, like the saps he used to make. He told me how he went through a whole litany, and the best one he made was using the leather, but he used BBs. He even had a specific designation of the BB size for the sap, for the greatest compression, like when you hit somebody and the reverberating shock from the pellets would knock you out quicker and easier.
That's just evil. I mean, he's just an evil.
He literally researched it and figured out, and he's telling me, I think it said it's got to be number 8 BBs. He goes, number 8 steel BBs, not copper BBs, but steel BBs. And the reason why is because the steel had a different vibration level to it than copper. This fucking guy was intelligent in how he went about shit and how he figured it out. And see, again, so that comes right back into the face of what I'm saying. He knew what he was doing. He wanted to do what he was doing. He was just pure fucking no good and evil. That's it.
Exactly. That's why he doesn't deserve any more discussion about him.
He was extremely intelligent. I mean, I don't know what they got on record on, but I know speaking to him when we did, this guy, when it came to machining and mechanics and stuff, he was like just unreal. He should have been working at fucking NASA. I mean, he was that good.
I just think it goes back to what you're saying, Carlo. He was evil, and you can't change that. If you're born evil, you're evil. That's it. So how did you end up testifying against him? And
what did you testify?
What did you testify? And then I want to talk about possible victims that are still out there, because we know there's a lot.
Yeah. Well, like I said, when the detectives started talking to me and I started telling, he said this, he did that, blah, 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 and they're scribbling. And then they started talking to me and they said, look, we want to get somebody else over here to talk to. And that's when they brought Stephen K into the picture. And
who's Stephen?
So we got...
Prosecutor.
Who's Stephen K., the prosecutor?
Yeah. So, when we started talking, and then Stephen was coming and talking, and he's telling me, he says, no, he goes, everything you're telling us is true. And I go, what do you mean it's true? He goes, no, that's what you're telling me about. He goes, that's what he actually did. And then he told me that there's, a bunch of girls, I said, no, these are all girls and stuff that he actually murdered and brutalized and tortured, and I'm like, you're kidding, And in fact, it was Stephen who told me, he says, the detail of my knowledge, he goes, is so extensive and deep. He goes, there's things you told us that we couldn't even figure out until you told us, and then we figured it out. He goes, had you not been in jail already, he goes, I'd seriously think you were involved. And he looked me square in the eyes when he said it. And I was like, I kind of got a little queasy at first, because I'm like, no, you ain't going to try and charge me for some of this shit. That's what went through my head, momentarily.
Absolutely.
But, wait a minute, you think you're going to charge me for some of this shit? Nah, And then, but he explained, he said, no, he goes, you've been in jail. You were in jail when this, and this was done. So we know that you weren't involved. And that's when Stephen told me, he says, look, I need you to testify. He says, I was already on my way to prison, so there's nothing they can do. And he knew that. He told me, he said, look, I can't do anything for you. He goes, I can have you sent to a good place. I said, dude, he goes, but he told me, he says, look, we need you to testify. He goes, because you're the only person that knows some of these things. And he goes, I can't do nothing for you. And that's just that. So we talked about it some. And once I started really grasping the concept of it all, that this fucking guy actually did this. And I'm looking at Stephen, I'm saying, so you mean to tell me when he did this and that, I explained to him with hand motions, where he took the ice pick and did this. And that's what really blew him away. Because I knew exactly from which side of everything, how it was done. And then which way he twisted the ice pick in a circle to twist and stress the tissue to cause ripping, things like that. There were certain things but they didn't understand what had happened and how that happened until I explained it. When I did, they're like, son of a bitch. And that's what pretty much sealed the fate of it. They talked to me.
Well, let's talk about this for a second. Hold on one second. What I'd love to do is kind of take us through the day that you were on the stand. I would imagine Lawrence was in the courtroom and you were looking at him when you're testifying against him. So kind of take us through that day.
Well, he wouldn't really look at me. That was kind of like, he kept looking down, and every once in a while I'd catch him glancing just a little bit. No, he wouldn't look. I looked at him. I was looking all around the courtroom. I was nervous. I was like, I was not ready for what I was dealing with. I didn't know what I was really doing. I just got up there, and Stephen would ask me questions, and I would give him the answer. And I remember I kept watching how people were, because I was conscientious of how they all saw me. Not that they're not sitting there judging me, but, that was just my view on, like, they're all watching me, they're all judging me, they're thinking, I had that conscientiousness about what I was in jail for, and they're questioning me, okay, well, and that's like they wanted to question me about his lawyers tried to question me about my murders and stuff, and I told them straight, I was like, dude, I'm not telling you shit. Or something like that. I refused to answer. And they were like, what? And then the judge stepped in and said, no, he ain't going to answer because that's not part of, he cut him off too.
How old were you when you testified?
I was 20 or just turned 21.
Wow, you were really young.
Yeah.
And he gave you locations of where he put some of these bodies, didn't he?
Yeah. Well, see, the thing was, is at that time, they would not take me out of jail and take me to locations to let me look at shit or tell them what I knew or show them what I could, because I'm dyslexic. I'm what's known as tri-dyslexia. I think in 3 dimensions. My whole thought process and the way I comprehend things is from a 3-dimensional perspective. So when I read something, I have to read it 3-5 times like that. I always odd numbers. Okay, it's just one in quirks, but at least 3 times. If I ask you a question and you give me an answer, I might ask you that same question again, but I'll ask you in a different way. Same sentence, but different word structure setup. And your answer will be identical. And I might come back with a 3rd question. Same situation, all different words and structure setup, but asking pretty much the same thing, and I'll hear the same answer. And it's not your answer so much as it's the formation I develop in this 3-dimensional questioning. And it helps me that's how I understand things. I have to kind of have a peripheral comprehension. Otherwise, I'll get confused.
So he told you locations and then...
Told me about places, and I knew where those places were at. But when I told the detectives about it, like the one thing with the buried evidence, and that was, at that time, that was like one of the most important things. There were 2 bags of fucking evidence. And Laura, if you had been able to find this would have opened the door. That's why it was such an important thing that they kept it hidden. And that piece of shit of a lawyer, that piece of shit of a lawyer he had, that bastard should have, God, he was a snake. They had a bag of evidence in the back of the van hidden behind the wall panel where the tail light was. And the lawyer goes and gets the van out of the impound, and they destroyed the evidence. Bittaker told me it was there. Norris told me it was there, and the lawyer denied it. But when the police got to the van, the shit was gone. Once it had been released, and they went back to get it, it was gone.
Well, Carla, we plan on going to find that buried spot.
Okay, so the only person that knew that bag was there other than the principals, who else would have went and got the van? Yeah, the lawyer went and got the van out of the impound, had it over there at his lot, and somebody happened to burglarize it and steal that bag of evidence. You get it?
Mm-hmm.
The lawyer was a fucking snake. He was dirty. There's another bag of evidence, and I'm talking like a big Ziploc baggie full of chains and necklaces and personal items. Pictures, Polaroid pictures, because that's what they used a lot. They had a Polaroid camera. They would take, Polaroid pictures, cassette recordings of the victim screaming. You have no idea.
That's the one we're looking for.
No, do you think that tape they heard in the courtroom was something? No, that was only a partial tape from one victim. Okay, there were some recordings and shit that they did that were hours long.
Ugh.
Okay, they went and got the 120-minute cassette tapes. It's 60 minutes on each side type thing, to do their recordings with. And literally, they had cassette tapes in there that were completely full of shit like that. And again, at that time, I didn't believe. Even now, it's like I almost question. Did this really happen? When the fuck am I going to wake up? And this is just all some crazy ass dream. I've thought that one over a few times, because it just is so insanely crazy what was done, how it was done. And like I say, the person he actually had a charm about him. Bittaker, he had a charm about him. The way he spoke, he spoke very softly for one, very low. For me, at that time, he was older than I am, so he was about, a good 15, 18 years older than I was, at that time. So it almost was like a big brotherly thing. But again, the things he's talking about, I didn't believe him. Not at first. And then the more he went on and on, I figured, well, some of it's true, but a lot of it's bullshit. It has to be. Later on, when the Bonin situation arose, they moved me out of high power to the 8,000 floor. That's when they all started, they talked to me first, the detectives on Bonin, and they're the ones that had me moved. And then later on, when they came and they talked to me about Bittaker, and I was like, nah, you kidding me? That guy's full of shit. He's blah, blah, blah. And they're like, no, tell us, and like I say, all roads led to where we're at now.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about, there's a couple other talking points here we want to kind of hit before.
What's that?
A couple of the things we want to hit with you as far as talking points. And one of them is there's one missing person that's unaccounted for that's related to the Knott's Berry Farms. And do you know anything about that?
Now, see, that, they both said stuff about it. Like I say, first Bittaker, was bragging about all the different ones. And it's like, Oh yeah, he goes, we tried to grab this girl they would try to, or like, oh yeah, we grabbed this girl one night outside by the main entrance at Knott's Berry Farm, some blah blah blah. He goes, Roy hurried and grabbed her, and when he pulled her in, I hurried and hit her, and blah blah blah, and then we took off. And I'm like, well, okay, sure. You know what I mean? A lot of this, I wasn't trying to remember any. I didn't believe it.
Did they say that there was understood? Did they say that anyone else other than just him and Roy were involved?
Well, no, he had other partners at one time. He had somebody else that was before. See, he knew Roy through someone else. I can't remember exactly how the relationship was, but I know that he was doing this stuff with this other guy for a minute at first. Okay. And then somehow or another, him and Roy, they had known each other there. They'd both been to prison and been in the sexual predator thing, I guess, whatever it is. They were around each other because they kept those kind of people together. But they weren't convicted for murdering and all that stuff at that time. They were other, low level criminal crap, or lower level, put it like that, but.
Hey, Laura, what do you remember about, we've talked about the Knott's Berry Farm girl and how.
Yeah, you're right on, Carlo, but you're just mixing up Bittaker with Norris. It was Norris who was with Jackson, and they had been in Tuscadero for the sexual crimes before.
Okay, yeah, they were together. All right, but it's the other guy that introduced Norris to Bittaker.
Yeah, they had their own little group when they went to CMC. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Do you remember them, Bittaker mentioning, or Norris, third guy that was there at Knott's Berry Farm?
Well, that's what I'm talking. Yeah, this other guy. I can't remember his name, but he was like one of their friends. I think he was the one that actually had started doing crimes with Bittaker first, before Norris showed up, or he was the one that introduced Norris to Bittaker. From my understanding.
Do you remember?
Maybe it's the other way around. Maybe it was Norris that introduced him to Bittaker. Yeah, because in any event, they ended up doing crimes together. And Roy explained to me when he and I finally talked that the guy, I can't remember his name, Mike or something, I can't remember the guy's name, but Roy had told me it. He didn't really trust Bittaker. He didn't really like Bittaker and trust him. There was conflicts between them quite often. I think a lot of it had to do with Bittaker's overbearing little personality. And yes, it was a little personality because it's only overbearing to other little ones. I think they even had a fight one time, I remember they had a fight one time or something. The guy socked shit out of Bittaker, and Bittaker threatened to kill him. And after that, Roy had told him, that's when you need to get away because something's going to happen. Because I think it was that Bittaker was trying to get Roy to help him kill him.
Would this guy have gone to the police and turned them over?
Yeah, well, it's the same guy that turned him, that busted them all at the hotel. That's how they were able to get him. He had something to do with it. And I don't know what, but he got caught for something and he gave them up. You see, he got caught for something else entirely and told them, hey, I know about this seal here. And that's something like that. And that's when the whole door blew open. But I do know, I can't remember that guy's name. Mike, it might have been. It was some...
Joe?
Huh? Joe. There we go, Joe. Mm-hmm. Joseph.
Does that line up, Laura? Did Joe get busted for something and then flip on them?
He was busted and had turned informant, yes.
Yeah, and that's what, so he got out, didn't he?
Oh, yeah. He got out. He was never charged with the Knott's Berry.
Yeah, but he was also one of the killers, too. Or he was involved in it. In one of the killings.
Did Bittaker tell you that?
No, Roy did. They were like a little crew at one time, like, a 3-man team for a few times. It wasn't just one victim. There wasn't just that girl at Knott's Berry Farm. See, the reason they go to Knott's Berry Farm is because it was easily accessible. See, again, you can't look at it now. You have to look at it 40 years ago. Knott's Berry Farm was where everybody went. All young people, kids went because we could afford to. You see, you could ride the bus. You had the RTD back then. They call it Metro now, but back then it was called RTD, Rapid Transit District. And you could catch the RTD anywhere for it was like 15 cents. It was cheap. And Knott's Berry's Farm was cheap. You could get in. It was real easy. You didn't have all these restrictions and dress codes and crap like Disney had.
Norris told you that Joe participated in some of the murders?
Yeah. You guys didn't know.
Mm-mm.
I had always thought from talking to...
I always thought he was convicted of this shit too, that he pled guilty for one of them or something. That's why when you're telling me he's out, I'm like, wait a minute. I'm thinking he got convicted because he was he was part of what they were doing.
Wow. Okay,
come on. He was already a child. He was already a convicted molester in prison with Roy when they got out and met Bittaker and started doing their little cha-cha together. Think about it.
It makes sense.
Do you think Roy was going to let him go on a kidnapping, rape, and brutalization of some girl and him kill her and let him go? Really?
Well, what was interesting to me with Roy is, so they met at the Dunkin' Donuts that day, the same one that Kristen Messenger worked at. And according to Joe's story, Norris pulled out all these photographs of the young girls and was showing them to him and telling him that Bittaker and him had been killing girls up in the mountains. This is Joe's version, right? It never made sense to me, because then Norris proceeded to drive him around Redondo Beach and Torrance and show him houses of all the girls he was watching. One was a flight attendant, one was a girl in a beauty shop, one was a girl in a Foot Locker, one was a 13-year-old girl. He was watching her father when her father came and went, and showing Jackson all these girls he's been watching and stalking, which never made sense to me unless Joe was part of this.
Yeah, why would he show him?
Thank you. Exactly. I mean, come on.
And
Joe was already convicted.
He was a serial rapist. Yeah, it was.
Yeah, exactly. So why was Norris telling him about all this? Because they were going to be doing it together.
Exactly. And when I read the report from Paul Bynum when Joe came forward, the very last thing is he goes, when I go to Bittaker and Norris and talk to them, what are they going to tell me about you? And the last line is Joe saying to Paul Bynum, they're going to tell you about a Knott's Berry Farm murder, but it's all bullshit. And then it ends. The report ends. Bynum must have stopped the interview there, or he didn't document what was said after that.
Yeah, and the reason why they never said anything else about what Joe might have been involved with them is because to do so, they would have to admit to more shit that was known about, that wasn't known. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah. Now they would have to open up Pandora's box.
Roy, even though Roy turned on Bittaker, Roy wasn't going to tell them everything he did with Joe, even though Joe was testifying, because Joe didn't testify against Norris. You see?
Right.
Oh, that makes sense. Okay.
So why is Norris going to open his mouth and say, well, no, Joe's lying. We actually killed this one and that one and another one together. No, guess what? Now you got 3 more murders. Guess what, Norris, your deal's off. You're going to death too. You see what I mean? He's not going to tell them.
Right.
And the only reason why Joe told them, well, he'll tell you about this, blah, 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 is because Bittaker knew about that one.
Bittaker was there. Bittaker even admits it to law enforcement in an interview about the Knott's Berry Farm murder.
But see, nobody could get anything else on Joe because nobody was talking about it. Nobody knew about the other murders. And there are a few that were committed that still are not known. There's at least another 12, if not more.
What's interesting, you just said...
don't even know about.
Wait, say that again, Carlo. Say that one more time.
There's at least another 12, if not more, victims that nobody even knows about, that they never found out about or never discovered. Norris didn't make a deal with the prosecution because it was the right fucking thing to do. He made a deal to save his ass. Same thing, Joe. Joe got busted on some other shit, and he's trying to save his ass. So he told him about Bittaker and Norris. And that's why, like you said, when he asked him, well, what's they going to say about you? Oh, well, they'll try and say this one, blah, blah, blah. But wait, why would he know that's the one they would say?
Yeah.
Because it's the one that happened, that they were all together with.
Pretty specific.
Cindy and Rob, do you remember when we talked with Dina about the tape under the fridge that has a recording of 12 to 13 different girls screaming on it?
Mm-hmm.
What?
Yeah, there was a witness. One of the teenagers testified that there was another tape under the fridge. It was never recovered. It's in the buried evidence that there were 12 different girls screaming on a tape.
Oh, shit. This is the first time hearing about that part.
Yeah.
Well, it lines up with what you just said.
Steve,
it lines up exactly what you said.
I know there was some evidence of other victims that they knew about, but they couldn't figure them out or something. But I didn't know that they had a specific number, just like I did.
Yeah, they said 12 to 13. She said it was 12 to 13. She had heard different screams, different girls.
Well, this is the problem with when prosecution gets you into their sights. They just want to get the conviction for whatever it is, whether it's 1 or 12. If you've killed 12 people and they can get the conviction for 1 and get you on the death penalty, they'll do it. So that's what their focus was.
Like I say, even now I'm listening to some of this and it still baffles me that to even think that, son of a bitch, they actually did this stuff. I mean, all these years later, I still understand. I mean, the clarity is not faded one bit for me. And again, I still question. It's like, this can't be real. This can't have happened. They raped them and killed them, but they didn't do all of that, And then gradually I started learning and having to accept that, yeah, they actually did. I still have not doubts, just a bafflement, I guess. I mean, I don't know, almost a shock. It's like, I don't want to completely accept it. Even though I know it's all true, even after all these years and all this time and all this crap, I still want to have this doubt about that level of insanity and madness with people.
It's hard to process. You
got to understand some of the things I've had to see.
Yeah, so your barometer is pretty much out of whack compared to most people.
You see so much, it has this, I don't know, it's like an effect.
Yeah.
I know how evil humanity is now, and I'm constantly on guard because of it, but I'm always wanting to doubt it. You know, it's like you don't want to really see people as they truly are, I guess. I don't know. It's like I always wished it wasn't true type thing, you know.
Laura, this sounds like, based upon your reaction, is what he just told you is kind of new information for you? Or does it confirm a lot of what you said? What Carla was saying about what he just said about the 12 other murders and stuff like that, is that something you've heard from Bittaker before?
This was even in the courtroom. She testified to this, one of the witnesses. There's 12 to 13. She heard a tape of 12 to 13 other victims recorded on a tape. This is in the buried evidence.
No, as far as what Carlo told you, though, to kind of confirm that.
I didn't even know that. He's never said the number 12, but when he said it, I was like, oh my God, that's exactly what she said in court, the witness. Yeah.
Well, one time before when you and I were talking and you asked me if I thought there were others, I said, yeah, there are. There's got to be at least another 10, 12 or more.
Must have forgotten it. I know you know so much more. And I was like, well, that's what I'm finding in the discussion. But that number is just, it just clicked exactly what the witness said.
But, you know, and to that evidence that we were talking about, now there's that one bag of stuff, there are trophies that ended up being disappeared by the lawyer, but there was another bag of trophies of the previous group, okay, that they didn't know about. And that bag was buried by Forest Lawn and Griffith Park, right at the horse area. And that's what I was telling you about a couple of years ago when we were talking more about the 3 trees in the triangle shape, okay? There's a specific design that these particular trees were obvious and they were easily seenable. And that's why they used that spot, so they would always be able to find it.
Yeah, because Bittaker had planned he thought he was going to get off these charges because all they had was Jan, and he thought he could get rid of Jan and he could go back to his trophies. You know, he didn't want to part with them.
Even with Jan, all they might have gotten was a conviction for a rape or something. He would have
not even a rape.
Probably even
an aggravated assault was all they were going to get.
Yeah, 6 months, a year, he'd have been right back out again. You see, but this I know, and I mentioned this to you before, and we spoke earlier, and I mentioned it again, Laura. That whole case against Bittaker was shaky. They didn't have a good case. You know this, right? Even with what I knew and what I had testified and with what I had told them about and agreed to testify, they were still completely uncertain about their case until I took the witness stand. And when I walked off that witness stand, everybody knew that he was convicted because there was too much shit. I knew specific details and things like that where I told them a pinpoint. And it matched, and in fact, it actually pulled certain parts of the whole case together. And the thing is I guess I came off, like Steve told me later, I came off extremely believable. He says, I don't know, he goes, you were very believable. Everybody realized what you were saying and that you were telling the truth. So that kind of helped tremendously. And like I say, literally, I'm the nail in his coffin.
Next time on Partners in True Crime. This is just part 1 of Carlo's exclusive interview. Part 2 will be on next week.
Please visit our website where you can subscribe to the podcast, find show notes, and check out extra content from all of our podcasts. All rights reserved. This has been a production of 722 Media Content.